Welcome in. It is Big Ten today. We are presented by Gatorade on this Friday. Dave Revson, Andy Katz. We had a one-day aberration in Big Ten basketball where the road teams won, and now we go back to home team dominance as of last night.
And we are snugly here, out of the cold and snow, ready to break down some Big Ten basketball.
Yes, and then ready to get into the cold and snow to go to our weekend destinations. But that's our problem, not yours.
Yes.
Let's get to our big story. Illinois' win over Michigan State. The Illini bouncing back from their first conference loss Friday at Purdue. They did so behind a balanced scoring effort, had 5 players in double figures. Michigan State played far better than it did last time out at Northwestern, but still fell short. The Spartans now 1-4 in Big Ten play. That is their worst start under Tom Izzo. Let's start with the Illini here, Andy, and it was far from their best game, and yet I think it speaks volumes when you don't play your best and you win. They had Ty Rodgers, who was the offensive star early on in this game. He took advantage of the matchup. Michigan State tried to guard him with a big, which teams have been doing a little bit, drove the ball. They weren't shooting it great, but the Illini figuring out a way.
So first off, at the beginning of the season, obviously they expect Terrence Shannon to be there the whole time. He is indefinitely suspended. So if you said the big four for Illinois was potentially going to lead them to a top 4-line seed and deep potentially in March or maybe for the Big Ten title, would be Marcus Domask, Quincy Guerriere, Ty Rodgers, and Coleman Hawkins. You would have said, okay, I'll take Coleman Hawkins. The other three, I don't know.
Right.
But that's their four. That's their core four right now that I think are going to be there, for the foreseeable future, and they're playing well enough to lead them to a top 4-line seed and challenge at the top of the Big Ten.
Coleman Hawkins was unbelievable last night. I mean, that is who he can be when he kind of plays under control, when he takes good shots, when he is assertive. I mean, rebounding, blocking shots. I just thought he was fabulous. And we've seen bits and pieces of this through the years. I mean, to your point where you went through the four and said, okay, yeah, I'll buy Coleman Hawkins. I mean, Coleman Hawkins is an NBA prospect. We just haven't always seen it from him. But, man, if that's the Coleman Hawkins you get, he is such a matchup issue for people.
He was injured in December.
Right.
He's come back from that, and he's bought in. I mean, his energy has always been tremendous. It's always been high level. He's very active on social media, so he's, pumping, Illinois' case and his case and everything else, which is great because he's confident in himself, in this team, and also he's all in. When you flirt with the NBA, and I remember talking to him at the draft camp at Chicago, all those guys that go to Chicago, they want to stay in.
Right.
It wasn't there. He wasn't good enough. He wasn't going to be in the first round. So now you go back to Illinois. What are you going to do? All right, well, I'm all in. I want to make this work for this time. Stay in the moment. He is in the moment.
I want to talk about Michigan State because they were the big story over the weekend. The loss to Northwestern, and Tom Izzo really laid into his team. I understand they lost the game, but that is a really tough place to win. I mean, you're playing a top 10 team on the road in a notoriously difficult environment to play in. I thought Michigan State played really well.
Yeah, so this is the problem. If we look at this game in a vacuum, okay, and just take it by itself, you'd say, all good. They only had 7 turnovers against Northwestern. They had 13. Their big four all played pretty well. I mean, Hall going from 0 points and rebounds to 14 and 7. Walker got 17, Akins 13, Hogard 16. Now 5 and 19 threes, that's a problem for them. They still don't consistently, and late in the game when they needed a three, they had a couple of good looks. They just didn't drop. But we can't treat this like in a vacuum because they're 1-4. So they're in a deeper hole. So the plus is they're playing better, much better than they did the other night. But we don't know which Michigan State's going to show up here. I mean, they've got a stretch of games coming up where you could say they could win 4 of their next 5 and right themselves and be right back, in the top 4 or 5 of this league. The problem is, are we going to get what we saw against Penn State? Is it Northwestern? Is it the great effort against Illinois, but it wasn't good enough to just get over the hump on the road? We don't know. That's the problem.
You talk about winning 4 of the next 5 potentially. I was on Ken Palm, which is an unbelievable website. We'll give it its annual shout out, although I probably shouted out more than that.
Izzo, not a fan of analytics.
Okay. They do their he'd be a fan of this. They do the predictive right? Every game
Yes.
based on the analytics. Michigan State is favored in 11 of its next 12 games on Ken Pom. So to your point, look, this
Is the one they're not Purdue?
Yes.
Okay.
This schedule was difficult off the top, but you go down the list here going forward, and they've got great chances to win games here. And I think if they play like they did last night, you mentioned Malik Hall. I mean, that was night and day. And Malik Hall, that was uncharacteristically,
Yes.
I mean, he was invisible against Northwestern, other than maybe doing a couple things that were detrimental. He really helped them, I thought, last night. And again, I guess maybe it's my unfailing belief in Tom Izzo. Like, I just feel like they'll figure it out, and I do think the schedule's conducive.
Well, and the crazy thing, and Michigan State's not going to be alone in this. I think there are going to be a handful of teams, Michigan State one of them, that will have a seed that corresponds to its record and the way it played, but not to its talent. And so what I mean by that is Michigan State could be, who knows, they could be anywhere from a 7 to an 11. You know, I mean, we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But do you want to play them in round 1 or 2?
Yes.
If
The
they play to their
sixth seed
best?
who draws them as an 11, right?
Right. I mean,
that's a reward for you.
But you're going to get seeded to who you are statistically.
Yeah.
And some coaches are going to say, this isn't fair. That was a top 5 team at the beginning of the year. But they didn't play to it.
Right.
But that definitely could happen in March.
Maybe they will play to it down the stretch. Let's see. But again, we'll see if they can get back on track. You and I are going to be there when they take on Rutgers on Sunday. How about Maryland? They were down 12 at the half at home to Michigan. Michigan playing without Doug McDaniel. It looked to be dire for the Terps, but then Dante Scott, man, what a second half for him.
So, again, at the beginning of the year, we thought Dante Scott, Jameer Young, Julian Reese, that they would be consistently at a high level. Kevin Willard was so high on his newcomers, they were going to be a tournament team. They, at times, look like a tournament team at home. They have not, obviously, on the road. And last night was an example of Dante Scott answering the call. Did not have a good first half, responded in the second, stepped up to that. You know, they're another team that, unfortunately, just does not get anything out of its bench. And that's costing them on the road. But they're going to be trouble at home. They're going to beat people. So in that next 5, when I talk about Michigan State, if I'm not mistaken, one of them is at Maryland. And, you know, they may be favored technically, but that's a tough game for anybody, let alone a team that's not been consistent. And so Maryland's going to cause problems for people at home and really be a bit of a spoiler here in the final 7 weeks.
Now, to your point, they've won 25 of their last 27 home games. I mean, they are really good there, and Dante Scott was incredible, 20 points in the second half. Julian Reese, who you mentioned, was just tremendous, 14 and 13. He blocked 5 shots as well, so just an all-around really good effort from those big stars for Maryland that gets them a much-needed win. What about Michigan? Playing without Doug McDaniel, as I mentioned, suspended for road games for the foreseeable future. They got off to a nice start. There's just not any depth there, really. I thought Jalen Llewellyn, given the circumstances, given coming back from the injury, I thought he played pretty well, but it's a challenging situation for Juwan Howard right now.
Yeah, there's no question they sort of ran out of steam. Llewellyn's going to have to step up to a high level. McDaniel was not just their leading scorer, but their playmaker, their leader on the court. And he can technically, I mean, this is the way it was explained to me by Michigan, so it sounds more like a probation, like he's got to be in class, like can't miss class, you know, because that's why he can't go on the road. He's got to be academically focused the whole time. But technically, he can play in home games. So now if you're Juwan Howard and the staff, how are you coaching essentially 2 different teams? Because he is so ball dominant when he's on the floor.
Leads the Big Ten in minutes.
Yeah,
I mean, he's
so
just omnipresent.
if he's allowed to play at home, that's a different team. Then when you go on the road, you've got to figure out, okay, we've taken out someone who's going to have his hand on the ball most of the time. Now how do we play?
Yeah,
and they had a short time to prepare for this road game, but that may happen, and we got to track if it does for Michigan over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, really interesting to see how they handle that. They've got a game, like you're 6-10 now, you're 1-4 in the Big Ten. They've got Ohio State on Monday at home. Got to win that game, right? I mean, just got to grab some
That's
momentum.
a big game for Ohio State, too.
It is a big game, right? And I do think, like, when you look at teams that are on the bubble right now, and you can't even, you know, not on the bubble, but teams that are kind of searching to define whether or not they're tournament teams. you got to win a few road games. You got to figure out, hey, where can we pick off a game? And if you're Ohio State, you would say to yourself, well, clearly we can pick off a game at Michigan.
One quick thing I would say about Michigan, and this is how fine line the confidence meter is. Michigan goes into St. John's, has a great win early in the season. We see what's happened with those two programs. That was positive. They win at Iowa. But I go back to their loss at Oregon and their loss to Florida and Charlotte. Those were both late possession games that they lost. Had they won those two games, even with this McDaniel suspension, I think it's a different narrative with Michigan. 2 games, non-conference, high-profile Power 5 opponents, and they couldn't close them out.
But that's been the theme.
Yeah,
2
I know.
years. They cannot win close games. I mean, it's just
last year
crazy.
they should have been a tournament team,
Absolutely.
and they lost multiple games down the stretch.
Yep.
That were close.
About Klesmit, though, only 1 double-figure game in the last 6 that he's played.
Klesmit breaks the field goal drought and gives the Badgers the lead. Klesmit with some confidence to the rim. Klesmit again. If you had Max Klesmit carrying the Badgers lead, congratulations.
What a second half it was for Max Klesmit. Wednesday night in Wisconsin's win over Ohio State, he scored all 18 of his points in the game in the second half, and on top of that made things really tough on the Buckeyes. Jamison Battle on the defensive end held them to just 4 points in the final 20 minutes after he scored 14 in the first half, and as was pointed out here, Battle did not score in the final 12 minutes of the game. Max Klesmit joins us now. He is today's big interview. Max, I want to talk about the scoring first. It's not out of nowhere. I mean, you had 21 against Marquette. You had a really good game in the win against Iowa, but you scored 14 points in 6.5 minutes in this game. What was going through your mind as you were kind of torching the Buckeyes?
Yeah, I think it's just a credit to my teammates, kind of telling me stay aggressive, be yourself, be who you are. A lot of things in the first half didn't necessarily go my way in terms of finishing at the rim and different offensive things, but it's just the team that we have now, the confidence that we have in one another and, pouring into one another and really taking in the team aspect into account here and just having fun playing the game with one another at the end of the day.
It wasn't a whole lot of fun for Jamison Battle, as we mentioned there in the second half. You really shut him down, and that is kind of your bread and butter. I mean, you're one of the best one-on-one defenders, not just on your team, but in this league. Some guys don't seem to enjoy playing defense. Why do you relish it in the way that you do?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of one of the things that I got to bring to the table. It's kind of the edge, the not chippiness, but the competitive spirit that I kind of have behind me that kind of wills me and the team forward sometimes. When you go on the scoring droughts and stuff like that, you got to rely on your defense and, the hustle plays and the little things that matter in a game that won't show up in a box score. So I think just taking the pride in those little things is kind of the separator between me and some of the other guys that we play against.
Your teammates really praise your toughness. Where does that come from? Is that innate? Have you always been like that on the basketball court, or is it something that you incorporated into your game and learned along the way?
Yeah, I think it was kind of a learning curve along the way growing up, kind of just being, a little undersized in terms of, bigger guards, stronger guards, more athletic guards. So kind of just using like that competitive spirit like I was talking about, using that edge. And then, the other guys on the team feed off that as well. So whatever I can do to pour into the guys on the team, pull the best out of them, that's what I'm trying to do.
Your team's off to a great start. You're the only undefeated team left in conference play, and the clear difference from a year ago is offensively. I mean, just a dramatically better offensive team than last year. At what point did you realize in the offseason that you guys had a chance to be pretty good on that end of the court?
Yeah, I think we kind of found out from the start in the summer, just playing with one another, getting a feel for, how it's going to work. And it was a little slow, to be honest, to start off the year, 3 losses against 3 really good teams. But that's kind of just through the trials of how it all works early in the season, getting a feel for one another, brought in John, Nolan, and then the transfer in AJ. So just getting used to how each other plays, what each other's comfortable doing and things like that. So
It was a disappointing year last year, obviously, for you guys. A rare miss of the NCAA tournament, something that doesn't happen very often at all at Wisconsin. And in this era of the portal, Max, it really feels like it's a situation where a lot of people could have left. Why do you think this team stayed together after that disappointment?
Yeah, I think that's just kind of a credit to, everybody off the court here. On the court, in the weight room, we get after it. We compete at a high level each and every day. But then, we're able to turn that off once we step outside the lines. All 18 guys we got in this locker room are super close with one another. And, I think that goes a long way in terms of the relationship you have then on the court, playing with one another, playing with the pride, the joy, and just playing free. But I think that's really the key thing is the relationship that we've built with one another off the court here to start the year.
So you are from Neenah, Wisconsin, started your career at Wofford. I was looking at your recruiting profile on 24/7. They had you as a 0-star recruit. So I would say they missed just a bit on Max Klesmit. Tell me about your recruitment. Tell me about you in high school and who recruited you and how you ended up at Wofford.
Yeah, it was pretty slow for me to begin with. Junior year, it really started to pick up. Kind of got some Division I looks right after my junior school season, going into my last AAU season. Just had a lot of Division II offers kind of leading up to that, but I kind of got that offer from Wofford, and it was the most fitting for me at the time, so I kind of took it. It felt like the right fit and everything, and once I got there, kind of got a little homesick. It was hard for me to play with no family really at any of the games, considering I got a lot of family that still lives in Neenah and in Wisconsin in general. So, once I had the opportunity to come back here to Wisconsin and play, it was a no-brainer. I had to jump on it. It was a dream for me since I was a little kid. So I'm blessed here now that I'm back at the school that I've dreamed about being at, and, cherish every moment of it.
I know you grew up in a family of Badgers fans. Your first sporting event was a hockey game at the Kohl Center when you were 18 months old. You guys would drive down to Badger football games all the time. The first time you slipped on Wisconsin, I'm assuming it was Wisconsin practice gear, what was that moment like?
It was special. It was kind of hard to go into the bathroom, look at yourself in the mirror and see that you're finally in it. It was pretty surreal to me. But, that's just the thing about staying in the moment, being thankful for what you have in front of you, with whatever's in front of your face, be grateful and thankful for that. So just trying to take it really one day at a time here, still get the same feeling I had, the first practice where we threw on the practice jersey. I still get that same feeling when I got to put it on for each and every practice that we got throughout the season. So just keeping that same mentality kind of moving forward, being appreciative and grateful for what I got.
Do you see this as proving people wrong in any way? The fact that you are out there, the fact that essentially no one at this level recruited you at all or believed that you could play there, and here you are not just playing at Wisconsin, but a starter and a really key player in Big Ten wins?
For sure. I know I can definitely feel it. I feel like I proved a lot of people wrong, just in terms of back home and what the limitations people had on me and how far I could grow or what my ceiling was and stuff. But, I'm still growing as well. I think the ceiling's still pretty high. And that's what I love doing. We love proving people wrong here at Wisconsin. I think that's kind of what we're known for, having that edge, that competitive spirit. So it kind of works hand in hand, I guess, that I ended up back here. But, I think that's, like I said, that's the difference maker is kind of that competitive spirit, that edge that I play with.
You mentioned your family earlier. I know you have two siblings who play basketball, one in college, one in high school, and your family famously tries to get to every game. They even went to a game last year where you were out with an injury, went down to Evanston and watched Wisconsin play Northwestern. What has it meant to be able to share this experience, as you said, with your family now being closer to home?
Yeah, that's another huge aspect for me, going to the games at the Kohl Center, seeing all your family members in, 11 gear, Wisconsin gear, and, they almost look happier than I am to just be at the game, watching the game. So that's really for me when, you kind of it's bigger than yourself. It's bigger than the game of basketball. You bring a community, another group of people together for a bigger and better thing. So it's an awesome thing to be able to see all those people, travel from around the state that come to watch me.
Andy Katz was telling the story on the broadcast the other night that you are a meditator along the lines of J.J. McCarthy, who's kind of made that famous at Michigan. How did you kind of happen upon the practice of meditation?
Yeah, it kind of started with another teammate of mine, Carter Gilmore and Tyler Wall. Once I transferred in, they had kind of already started this meditation process, this breathing technique, stuff to calm you down before games. And, I've always kind of been amped up, hyped up, ready to go before the game, high energy, not really, looking to settle down at all. But they kind of taught me, and, the experience that they've had. Tyler's been here a while, so learning different tricks and tips from them, it really does help me calm down, put you in the moment. And I kind of like doing around that atmosphere, like I said, too, because, that's what you're going to be in. That's the hostile environment you got to be in. So you got to be able to, go from being at a crazy high energy level to bringing it all the way down to ground zero. So I think just kind of doing that before the game helps you during the game as well.
Yeah, that's what's interesting to me, that you do it in the arena rather than quiet place in the locker room. But it sounds like that's on purpose, right? That's by design, based on, hey, this is where the game's going to be. Is that what you're saying there?
Yeah, for sure. Obviously there's different techniques and stuff that you do off the court at another time. But I think, what I do, the technique that I used in the gym, in the arena, that wherever we're playing, it really helps me kind of be in the moment of where we are, not really get distracted by things that you can't control. You got to focus on what you can control and stay in the moment and worry about just mastering the moment in front of your face.
Well, let's focus on the moment ahead of you tomorrow as we wrap things up. You guys take on Northwestern. Wildcats are playing pretty well here. What's the scouting report on NU?
They got 3 really good guards that they play. Kind of similar to Ohio State last game in terms of just the heavy guard play and the usage rate on those guys. They got a great point guard in Boo Buie, and then the supporting cast and Barry, transfer in Langborn, and he's surrounded by shooters then as well throughout the other 4 spots. So I think just trying to contain him. You're never going to stop a really good player like Boo Buie, but being able to contain him, slow him down as much as possible, I think that's going to be a big key for us.
Max Klesmit, looking forward to watching that game tomorrow. Been a real pleasure to chat with you, and congratulations on proving all the doubters wrong and all your success in Madison.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I appreciate it.
You can see Klesmit and the Badgers in action. Again, it's tomorrow here on the Big Ten Network, game 1 of a doubleheader as they host Bowie and the Cats. That'll be followed by number 1 Purdue. First game since the Nebraska loss. They play host to Penn State. It's all tomorrow, only on the Big Ten Network and the Fox Sports app.
Forcing Bricky to go back to get it, but he banned on it. Snuggerud between the legs. What a goal by Snuggerud between his own wickets, and then he beats Turnit.
Official stuffs it for now, but can't hold it as Isaac Howard responds for Michigan State.
The power play on the goal line. Backdoor, they score! A beautiful pass. Dylan Duke to Gavin Brindley.
Land, good job by the referee to jump out of the way. Jimmy Clark in front, denied by Augustine.
Right, centering pass. The shot attempt from Boldenauer there went over top of the goal and out of play.
A few of the stars who have shined the brightest in the first half of the hockey season. Paul Caponigri is here. That Snuggerud goal.
That was pretty good. He said he whiffed on it too, by the way, on that one, but goal score. He had 5 last weekend, no big deal.
Yeah.
He knows how to do it.
He put it between the legs, claimed he whiffed on it.
He wanted to go high with it,
okay.
and it went through the legs. Hey, you know what? Just don't tell anybody, and we'll all think it's great.
Oh,
either way, we're
already told them.
Either way, we're impressed. He did.
our audience here. Yeah,
He's a humble
he can't
guy.
trust you with
He's a
anything.
humble guy.
All right, let's get to the 3 stars. So hockey has the 3-star tradition.
Sure,
We're going to
we'll
do
do
the
it.
3 stars of the first half. Let's start with number 3.
Number 3, I'm going with Seamus Casey. Michigan kind of had an up and down first half, but he's been dynamic for them. He's arguably the best offensive defenseman, maybe overall. And then he had a great World Junior. We'll talk about that in our second segment. But just a driving force for them on the back end. They've had a tradition lately of great defensemen with Luke Hughes, Owen Power. He's continued that. He's a second-round draft pick. Only reason I could see that happening was because he's not a very big guy. So like the measurables that way, but he is a dynamic skater, and he's going to need to have a really good second half if Michigan wants to climb up and make sure they make that NCAA tournament.
Second-round pick of the Devils, as you said. He is the second leading scorer in the Big Ten in terms of points and leading in assists. Really good. Okay, so he's number 3. Who's number 2?
My number 2 is Isaac Howard. Look, Michigan State and Wisconsin, I don't think Michigan State's been a surprise. I think people felt they were going to make a step this year, but it's guys like Isaac Howard that have kind of changed the look at Michigan State. They kind of were known as a team that didn't score a lot, weren't a really offensive-minded team. He's one of the guys they brought in the transfer portal from Minnesota Duluth. He was another guy in that World Junior team, so you're getting a little bit of a deal there, but he's a dynamic skater, another skill guy, and he's helped change their offensive strategy. I'm doing their game tomorrow. I'm excited to watch them for the first time as an analyst as opposed to just kind of watching. But he's a terrific player, and then he was dynamic, had 7 goals in the World Juniors, led all players there. So he's a huge reason for why Michigan State's had their success.
We'll get into that World Juniors team as you talked about the Big Ten just all over that team that won the gold medal. Number 1, I feel like we've kind of given this guy away a little bit during the course of the year, just given how much he's transformed the program.
And what a story, right? Like another one, we've had this in the Big Ten a couple of years, but Kyle McClellan has just been fantastic. He leads in every statistical category, save percentage, wins, shutouts. You thought, oh, maybe the first half was it. No, he comes back. They go to the holiday tournament up at Pfizer Arena in Milwaukee, and he goes back-to-back shutouts, and they win 3-0 both games. Look, their team in front of him is really good. They play a good style, but there's no way anyone saw this coming from Kyle McClellan. And that's what you love about sports. Hockey's got their version of it right now, and he's by far the number 1 star of the first half.
I mean, it's crazy how good they are defensively. They're giving up a full goal less per game than anyone else in the Big Ten.
That's probably a good recipe for winning.
If the other team can't score, you've really got half of the equation right there. Let's get to the standings, and lo and behold, there they are.
Go. Yeah, they're the only ones that played last weekend. They played Notre Dame, went into South Bend and swept them. So they've kind of put themselves a little separation there.
Yeah, it is important to note they have played 2 more games than Michigan State. So the Spartans are at 25 points, as you can see. Pretty big drop-off after that. Minnesota and Notre Dame, followed by Michigan and Penn State, and then Ohio State having a tough year. They have yet to win a conference game. Let's get into some of these ranked teams and kind of assess where they are at this point in the season. We start with Wisconsin. Again, it's an amazing story. It's Mike Hastings' first year. He's won everywhere he's been. I don't know why you'd be surprised that he's winning, but to win to this degree, to have been number 1 in the country after where they were last year, it's a pretty remarkable story.
Yeah, I mean, having played for him, I knew it was going to change. Obviously, we didn't know at this clip. I think what we just talked about, Kyle McClellan is a big thing because I talked to him this summer, Coach Hastings, and he didn't know who he was going to give Kyle a shot, but he did not know what he was going to have in goal. And to have a guy that's probably going to win the Richter Award for the top goalie in the country, he's trending that way, really, solidifies and maybe adds probably 3 or 4 wins, I guess, to what maybe we thought they'd have. But they do it. They're very deep. They don't rely on one guy to score, so that helps too. They're not scoring at an amazing clip, but they're getting enough. And like you said, they're giving up a goal less than Big Ten, but in the country about a half a goal more less than almost any other team, which is remarkable there. So Wisconsin's doing everything right. They won last week at Notre Dame. They won a 2-1 game, and then Kyle McClellan's maybe first hiccup, he gives up 4. What do? They score 7. So they're winning. They can win both ways. You saw it last weekend, so everything is going right for the Badgers.
Yeah, they were the last place team in the Big Ten a season ago, and Michigan State wasn't that far ahead of them.
Sure.
I mean, it almost feels like we just kind of flipped the standings from a season ago. They've been a really good story, too. Now, you were saying, hey, you saw this coming a little bit more, but still pretty remarkable. What stands out about the Spartans?
Well, I think when you look at what they did last year, they did pretty well with not a ton of talent, offensive talent, to move a team. Look, you got to have it. I don't care how good a coach you are. You got to have some of that high-end talent to move your team up. And he did that. He brought in some freshmen. You look at the goaltending with Trey Augustine. And Artem Levshinov was my freshman of the first half. You have two there. And then Isaac Howard we're looking at there. He has been fantastic. He's one of the transfer portal guys. They've had 4 or 5 guys out of there that are their top scorers. So when you kind of couple that, some freshman dynamic players with some transfer portal guys that are offensive minded, the talent level is elevated, and so Adam Nightingale's team is elevated with that talent.
Highest scoring team in the Big Ten. Only Denver has scored more goals nationally.
It's amazing to think where they were a couple years ago and where they are now.
Right, pretty cool story. Minnesota, I mean, it's been a little bit of a rebuilding year so far. Again, this is a program that has such high expectations.
Don't say that in me. Rebuilding, no way. They're thinking national championship.
All right, well.
The fans.
Right, I mean, and again, they were a game away from that a season ago. Is it reasonable to think this team can put it together here, make a good late run?
I think so, because with hockey, it's that weird thing where there's almost like a halftime in the season where you get a break. And a lot of those freshmen can come back, and you kind of looked at as sophomores now. You're not looked at as freshmen. And they have some really talented ones. If they are able to elevate a little more, I think consistency is the biggest problem for them. You look, even last weekend, they played Colorado College. It's a good team. They lost Friday, or so it was Sunday game, actually. They come back Monday night and win 6-2, and they look like a team. That's a team that could win a national championship. Jimmy Snuggerud, who we just saw, had a hat trick. He had 5 on the weekend. Obviously, they're going to need him. But it's those freshmen to maybe be able to win game in and game out instead of looking good one game and then kind of falling off the second.
So they were a Frozen Four team a year ago. Again, playing the championship game. Michigan got knocked out in the semifinals last year as well. When you look at the Wolverines, last year we were talking about how loaded this team was. Yep. So again, I don't think it's completely out of the blue that it wouldn't be at the level that it was a season ago. Yep. But still, really solid team. Where's Michigan as they head towards the second half?
They've struggled with injuries. If they are healthy, which they are, they're crazy. They had 41 days between actual games coming Friday. Now, they have an easier non-conference weekend to kind of get their legs right.
You would call it easier?
Well, Stonehill, they're the bottom team, yes. So you would hope that, because then their next 4 are against Wisconsin, Michigan State, and then Wisconsin. Right. So you got to, you don't want to get in bad habits, too, because say you win a game 10-0 or something, which that could very easily happen. They need these games, though, with where they're ranking. You cannot lose these games. Them and Minnesota have kind of games where they got to get right on and build up their resume for the pairwise.
Yeah, Stonehill 0-20.
Brand new program.
No, I like Michigan's chances. I don't know a whole lot about hockey,
chance,
but I like Michigan's chances.
Just saying, there's a chance
tonight. First game for the Huskers since their win over Purdue. Our big stat is brought to you by Gatorade, a smorgasbord of stats actually for the Hawks. It was their first home win over a number 1 team in nearly 70 years, and that, of course, was a team coached by Fred Hoiberg's grandfather, Jerry Bush. They're sharing the ball. No team in the Big Ten hits more threes. They're a good, solid, tourney, hopeful team. And Andy, back with us. You look at that game between Nebraska and Iowa. Nebraska could use it, I would say, tonight. It would certainly help bolster the resume. I think Iowa kind of needs it, Andy. These are the kinds of games you've got to win on your home court.
No question about it. Let's deal with Iowa first. They're not tournament ready yet. Can't put them out to pasture. They certainly still have a chance. There's still plenty of Big Ten games left. They didn't do enough in their non-conference, though. They're going to rely heavily on the league. That Michigan loss is going to haunt them, losing that one at home. So what can Iowa do here? Well, they've got a great shot to knock off a team that, while in the net may not have the profile, they certainly have a profile of being a tournament team. And they just got to do what they do, which is get up and down, score at a high volume, dictate the pace, and put Nebraska on its heels. Actually, something, believe it or not, that Wisconsin kind of did last Saturday, where Wisconsin ran up and down and played in the 80s. Iowa can play in the hundreds. As for Nebraska, in texting with Fred Hoiberg, he said, we've got to play with the edge that we had against Purdue in this game. We've got to get back on transition against Iowa, or we cannot win. We've got to communicate and deal with their motion offense and finish at the rim. These are things they did against Purdue. They've got to now basically transition that to Iowa City.
I think this could be a really fun game because you mentioned, look, Iowa gets up and down. Nebraska can certainly run with them. I mean, you're right. They didn't run very well with Wisconsin. They just didn't slow them down at all. But Nebraska has no problem playing up tempo, and they have the confidence of knowing they beat Purdue. They beat Iowa twice last year. They've never won 3 in a row against the Hawkeyes. So see if they can pull that off tonight.
One quick thing is I think we're going to see a lot of transition Tominaga threes. Like just he gets it, trailing, pop it real quick.
Right. I'm fascinated by Minnesota, Indiana tonight. If you were to ask Big Ten fans who has the longest win streak in the Big Ten, I don't know that many of them would answer Minnesota, but that is the case. It is 7 in a row. They're good. I mean, they're legitimately good. This is an excellent front line. You go against an excellent front line as well in Indiana. But it feels like Indiana, I mean, trying to find their way. They're coming off the loss to Rutgers. There's a lot of pressure on the Hoosiers in this game.
I think a tremendous amount of pressure. I mean, I think all the pressure is actually on Indiana. Xavier Johnson's going to have to be much more composed. And arguably, this might be his toughest assignment, dealing with Elijah Hawkins.
Right.
The transfer from Howard has been the best assist playmaker over the last couple of weeks in the country.
Leads the nation.
Not in the Big Ten. In the country. He's been the best. And so he's going to put Xavier Johnson on his heels, and he may need help defending him. I think Minnesota can match the physicality of Mbako, Ware, Renew on the Indiana side. Indiana in the Big Ten, more often than not, has the advantage on the front court, but with Payne leading the charge, I mean, Garcia can play physical. This is a team in Minnesota that I think certainly could cause problems also on both ends of the court. And Ben Johnson was telling me, like, they've been making winning plays, they've been physical, and that they've got to continue to do that in a tough road environment, which, by the way, I'll be interested to see how tough it is. It's cold, it's snowing, the team's struggling. You know, Indiana fans usually go no matter what. But I'm going to be intrigued to see what happens tonight in this matchup against a Minnesota team that maybe they don't respect as much, not the players, the crowd.
Right.
Will it have a similar atmosphere? I was there for Kansas. It was great. Will that kind of atmosphere be there on a Friday night, cold, snow against Minnesota?
And they have been really good at home. You mentioned the Kansas game. It's the only game they've lost at home, and they had every chance to win that game. As we know, Minnesota has a road win. They won at Michigan this year, so they've already exceeded last year's win total in the Big Ten. They're going to win a lot of games in the conference this year, so really good, solid team. So those are the games tonight. I'm going to be in West Lafayette tomorrow, Purdue and Penn State. I'm fascinated to see how the Boilers bounce back here.
Well, we have seen them in the one other time when they lost to Northwestern. They bounced back tremendously well because that was that stretch, if you remember, where they played Alabama in Toronto, Arizona in Indianapolis, beat up on some non-conference games, and then went to Maryland and won after the break. So I expect you are going to see a reset, refocused Purdue team that game got away from them against Nebraska. By the way, they could have lost there last year, and Nebraska wasn't even as good.
Absolutely. It went to overtime.
So I think we'll see it refocused. Zach Edey clearly has an advantage more than almost every game, obviously, is an advantage. But I think this is one of the teams he might have the most advantage against. Penn State is much more guard heavy, you know, with Clary and Ace Baldwin. It's funny, I was talking to Mike Rhodes, the head coach, and he may tell you the same thing, that he says we got to harass Edey, be aggressive, hold on and pray. You know, because they don't have the big. I mean, really, it's going to be down to Wahab. You know, Wahab's on his third school and fifth year or whatever. I mean, he's going to have.
He played really well the other night.
Right, and he's going to have to be. I mean, he's going to have to be basically. He's going to have to be big. He's going to be athletic, stretch out, force Edey all over the floor. But this is going to be his toughest assignment, without question. And you know, Rhodes said, if we ever get a lead, he didn't say ever. I'm saying it, but if you get a lead, they've got to be aggressive, continue, try to put Purdue on defense.
They don't defend the interior well, as you kind of pointed out. Part of it is just they don't have a lot of big guys, and they don't do a great job clearing the defensive glass. And those are both major problems when you're facing Purdue. I will say they harass the heck out of your guards. And we saw Purdue's guards struggle some with pressure last year. So that is something that Penn State does that could cause the Boilers problems. And we'll see whether or not those guys have made progress in that area. What about Northwestern and Wisconsin? The Cats won 2 close games last year when these two got together. This is clearly a much better Wisconsin team. What do you think of the matchup in Madison?
Well, let's first deal with the Badgers. I saw them the other night in Columbus. We talked about it on Thursday. So impressed with this Wisconsin team, their depth. Obviously, talked to Klesmit. I mean, he comes out at 18 points second half. Defensively shuts down Battle in the second half. But Hepburn's playing well consistently. Wall is playing some of his best basketball this season. The combination of Crawl and Winter is giving them a little bit of everything. They're scoring at a higher clip. They're defending. And in talking to Chris Collins, he is so impressed, like we all are, with this Wisconsin team and their overall balance and their physicality. So what do they have to do? They've got to play maybe their best defensive game that they've played really probably since the Purdue game if they're going to win this game. They can't take for granted, okay, we beat Penn State on the road. Let's split this road trip. I mean, they have to put that behind them. Yeah, they got that. That was really important for Northwestern. Lock in, and they absolutely have to deal with the athleticism of Storr and Blackwell because that's something that Northwestern didn't deal with last year. And they're going to have to be chasing them, whether it's Boo, Berry, Martinelli, Barnheiser. That's going to be a problem the way they're going to have to be dealing with Storr and Blackwell.
Yeah, it's interesting. Wisconsin is a deeper team by far than they were a year ago. Northwestern doesn't have a lot of depth. They're not as good, not as good a defensive team, Northwestern, as they were last season. And so we'll see whether or not they can deal with that outstanding Wisconsin offense. So one thing I'd say for Northwestern is when they get hot, they can really shoot it. And Wisconsin hasn't defended the perimeter. It's probably if there's an area where they've struggled a little bit this year, that might be it. So, again, you look at each side. Clearly, the advantages lie with Wisconsin, but you could see a path for Northwestern if they really shoot the ball well.